Witamy na rozwiązywaniu matury z angielskiego na poziomie dwujęzycznym, czyli takiej matury dla masochistów z języka angielskiego. Postaramy się to zrobić najszybciej jak się da, ale to nie będzie wcale takie szybkie. No to co? 9 zadań, bo ostatnie to wypracowanie. Zabieramy się do działania.
No, spróbujmy. Oby wyszło dobrze. Dobrze. Jako, że na dobry początek mamy tekst, w którym trzeba... tak, w którym zaznaczamy do wszystkich tekstów, więc najpierw przeczytamy, jakie mamy opcje odpowiedzi. Considers a risk-taking mindset to be an asset for a quiz show contestant. Points to a personality trait which facilitates committing trivial facts to memory. Finds questions which require deductive reasoning most appealing when he/she competes. Defends quizzing as a worthwhile activity in which individuals draw on their whole life experience. Stresses the feeling of accomplishment experienced on coming up with the correct response. Dobrze. Speaker A. At school, you are rewarded for memorizing an abundance of facts and minor details which are irrelevant in everyday life, and there's rarely any gain from being able to recall this information in the adult world. As a naturally curious person, I've always tended to accumulate huge amounts of such seemingly useless knowledge. Therefore, taking part in quiz shows has turned out to be a great way of doing something with all the information that I have acquired. Every time I participate in a quiz show, my friends and relations watch it. Wydaje mi się, że to powinno być relatives, ale okej. And to be honest, I really enjoy the attention. What motivates me is not so much outperforming other contestants as getting stuff right. Nothing gives me a greater sense of achievement than the moment when I manage to retrieve from my mind something that I didn't even know was there. Wydaje mi się, as a naturally curious person, więc mi się wydaje, że to będzie nasz A. Dobra, na razie ewentualnego drugiego jeszcze nie szukam. Ewentualne drugie będę szukał na koniec. The more quiz questions I answer, the more I see that they tend to fall into distinct categories, and that every contestant has his or her own preferences. Personally, I'm into those which ask about something hardly anybody knows the answer to, but which include the right clues, so that with some logical thinking and a talent for joining the dots, the contestant has some chance of giving the correct answer. A well-composed question will give you a sense of excitement, not because you've answered it correctly, but because the mental exercise of rooting around for the answer gives you such a thrill. Some questions are so clever that you don't mind getting them wrong. It's the challenge, not the result, that counts. To. I'm into those which ask about things hardly anybody knows the answer to, but which include the right clues.
Ale piękna, prosta linia.
No, prawie. Lekko krzywa jest. To tell you the truth, trying to learn a lot of trivial facts all at once doesn't work for me. In fact, I find getting ready for a quiz show extremely frustrating. Although there's very little you can do to prepare yourself for the fast pace of a show like Jeopardy, I found it helpful to make a practice buzzer and buzz along at home while watching the show. It's hard to substantially improve your reflexes, so contestants who have naturally quick reactions are at an advantage. You have to trust your instincts. As soon as you get an inkling of the answer, you hit the buzzer. To win, you also need to be okay with the prospect of losing the large sums of cash which are at stake. I got to the final that way. My optimal strategy has always been nothing ventured, nothing gained. To będzie to. To win, using large sums of cash which are at stake. quiz show contestants are often teased about committing countless obscure facts to memory only to satisfy their intellectual vanity and make a quick buck. However, I strongly believe that quizzing is never just about shallow recall. It's an exercise in quick thinking and possibly the only forum where everything a contestant has ever seen, read, tasted, heard of, or lived through can be treated as pure knowledge. A friend of mine, an English professor at a college in Bangalore, calls answering quiz questions an act of bricolage. This French term This French term refers to how a number of things can be combined to create something new and innovative. The bricolage process holds a sense of limitless possibility as far as ideas are concerned. It means that we can deduce many things we never knew out of the relatively few things that we do know. Tool. So jest naszym ostatnim punktem. Stresses the feeling of accomplishment experienced on coming up with correct response. Jakby to B mi tak średnio pasuje, bo to jednocześnie w innych widzę mało. So. Oh, twist. As getting stuff right. Nothing gives me a greater sense of achievement than the moment I managed to retrieve from my mind something that I didn't even know was there. Okay. To A. Udało się. Dobra.
Dobra, pięknie.
Za moment wygumkuję to po określonym niezbędnym punkcie. Bo to tylko było do komunikacji. Dobrze.
Dla wszystkich, którzy na bieżąco śledzą transmisję, to odpowiedzi do wszystkich poprzednich zadań macie w opisie.
Dobrze. Zatem task 2. To ponownie najpierw zobaczmy, co będziemy wybierać, a potem czytajmy. Bo tutaj już ciężko wszystko zapamiętać, bo te teksty są trochę cięższe. According to Fanny Moyle, the playing card on the back of the portrait of a lady signifies Anne's royal descent, holds a clue which points to Henry's fourth wife, indicates that the person portrayed had political power, conveys the message that the person's identity was to be kept secret. The ace of spades on the back of Thomas Cromwell's miniature was probably intended to mean that Cromwell got his position at court thanks to his diplomatic skills, could skillfully avoid giving a straightforward reply, had a tendency to speak his mind, did not take no for an answer. Fanny Moyle argues that the portrait of the lady was painted because Anne wanted to project an image more appealing to English tastes. The painter was instructed to make Anne look younger than Catherine. King Henry insisted on his new bride being painted without a veil. Anne's previous portrait had been disposed of by Catherine. Okay, so interviewer. Today I'm talking to the art historian Fanny Moyle, who has done research into Holbein, the court painter of Henry VIII. The miniature portrait you are going to talk about is from the royal collection, isn't it? Yes, the miniature was created in 1540 or thereabouts, but the identity of the woman in the painting has long been considered uncertain. The miniature is catalogued as Portrait of a Lady, perhaps Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard was Henry VIII's fifth wife. However, the evidence that I have put together supports my hypothesis that the miniature in fact depicts Anne of Cleves, the German noblewoman who Henry married in 1540 to form a political alliance. She was his fourth wife. What makes you think that it is actually a portrait of Anne of Cleves? I believe that Holbein left a tantalizing clue to her identity by attaching a particular playing card on the back of the miniature. It was the four of diamonds, which could have been intended to indicate Henry's fourth queen, Holbein always layered his works with symbols. For example, he put the ace of spades on the back of the miniature of Henry VIII's principal advisor, the shrewd politician Thomas Cromwell, a man who could call a spade without the slightest hesitation. So why do you think the miniature has traditionally been linked to Henry VIII's fifth wife Catherine and not Anne of Cleves? Well, partly because both weddings took place in the same year, 1540. It was assumed that the king would have wanted to portray the queen he loved, that was Catherine, and not the one he married for political reasons. From the very beginning, Henry was disappointed with Anne. He soon had the marriage to Anne annulled and quickly turned his attention to Catherine, who was much younger. And if you look closely, the portrait of a lady, it doesn't depict a teenage bride, so it's much more likely to be a picture of Anne. I see. Is there any other evidence to support your hypothesis that the 1540 painting portrays Anne? Well, we also have the portrait of Anne as a potential bride painted by Holbein in 1539 in Germany. I was struck by the uncanny likeness of the two portraits, which both feature heavy eyelids and thick eyebrows. I'm sure both pictures depict the same person. The portrait from 1539 shows Anne with her hair modestly covered under a veil. To the English eye it must have looked somewhat outdated. I think that portrait of a lady was painted soon after Anne's marriage, because she felt she needed to be seen anew in her new homeland. In this portrait she's wearing different garments, including a French hood, which at the time was all the rage in England. Unfortunately, we have no authentic portraits of Catherine. She was executed in 1542 for adultery, and any portraits of her, if they ever existed, would have been quickly destroyed. But a contemporary described her as a ravishing beauty, and it would be difficult to apply that description to the lady in the portrait. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you.
Powiem ci, że tutaj z moich rodzinnych źródeł, które tutaj oglądają nas w tym momencie, pozdrawiam, to nikt nic nie rozumie łącznie ze mną, to tak. Ja naprawdę jestem pełen podziwu dla osób, które naprawdę samoświadomie, bez przyłożonego pistoletu do głowy idą i to piszą. Żeby dostać 5 punktów procentowych, w sensie mnożnik zamiast 10 to 15% na studia. Nieźle, naprawdę.
Nie wiem, wygląda ciekawie. Może jakby czytał to ktoś, kto lepiej umie angielski, to by nie mylił się tyle co ja.
No, to nie chodzi o mylenie się chyba, tylko bardziej o to, że to niby angielski, a z drugiej strony tak nie do końca.
Dobrze. According to Fanny Moyle, the current... Okay, signifies holds clues. Points to Henry's blah, blah, blah. No okej, no ta. Nic innego nie pasuje. Gdzie to jest? A particular playing card on the back of the miniature. It was the 4 of diamonds, which could have been intended to indicate Henry's fourth queen. Okay. The ace of spades on the back of Thomas Cromwell's miniature was probably intended to mean that Cromwell had a tendency to speak his mind. A man who would call a spade without the slightest hesitation. Fanny Moyle argues that the portrait of a lady was painted because Anne wanted to project an image more appealing to English tastes. I think the portrait of a lady was painted soon after Anne's marriage because she felt she needed to be seen anew in her new homeland. She's wearing different garments, including a French hood, which was at the time all the rage in England. Dobrze. Daliśmy sobie radę.
BCA. Okej.
Dobrze. Następne zadanie. Następny tekst. Miło. speaker uses the kettle and teapot comparison to illustrate... Okej, no, nie będę czytał odpowiedzi, przeczytam najpierw tylko pytania. When talking about chat shows, the speaker, which of the following is true about American sitcom Friends? Okay, lovely. Text 2. As a cultural anthropologist, I have been exploring the differences between the British and American sense of humor. For example, we British use irony in a different way to our friends in the US. It's like a kettle to us, it's always on, whistling slyly in the corner of our daily interactions. To Americans, however, it's more like a nice teapot, something to be used when the occasion demands it. This is why an ironic comment will sometimes be met with a perplexed smile by an unwary American. Why? When Americans use irony, they will often immediately qualify it as being so with a jovial "just kidding," even if the statement is outrageous and plainly ironic. It's not so much about having a different sense of humor as a different approach to life. Americans, not being embarrassed by their emotions, are more demonstrative than we are. They clap louder, cheer harder, and emphasize more. Unconditionally. It's an openness that always leaves me feeling slightly guilty and apologetic when American personalities take part in British chat shows and find their jokes and stories met with smiles, not laughs, or their gags met with silent appreciation rather than claps and yelps. We don't like them any less, we just aren't inclined to give so much of ourselves away. Meanwhile, as a Brit on an American chat show, I find it difficult to sit through prolonged whooping without uncomfortable red-faced grinning. As the global village continues to expand, our emotional habits are shifting. Even though our uptightness is still a huge part of our charm, we are easing towards a slight liberation from our national inhibitions. Probably that is why the popular American sitcom Friends, a show often dismissed by the cynical as cheesy, was at once wholeheartedly adopted by the British public. So much so that many years after its final episode, a day briefly passes without its inclusion in program schedules. After all, we may all be different, but we are all capable of getting the same joke. In a world beset by prejudice and difference, how ironic is that? Okay. What the British and American have in common? This is the kettle and teapot. Contrast between the British and American attitude to using irony. When talking about chat shows, the speaker Oh god. Nie no, wydaje mi się, że it's an openness that always leaves me feeling slightly guilty and apologetic. Dobrze. Which of the following is true about the American sitcom Friends? It's true. It enjoys enduring popularity among the British public. It was at once wholeheartedly adopted. So much so that many years after its final episode, the date barely passes without its inclusion in the program schedules. Niesamowite. O, otwarte. Szczęść nikt nas nie ogląda, więc się ze mną nie będzie kłócił. Dobrze. Searching for a zebra in Ethiopia National Park is a challenge because, okay. Like anyone who has conducted field research, I have experienced various kinds of mishaps. Dobrze, Olu, będziesz się z nami kłócić. This is something in which I seem to have become an expert. Here's just one example. At the moment, I'm investigating the infectious disease burdens of the 15,000 strong population of wild zebras living in Etosha National Park. The most basic material for the research is blood samples. They are not easy to collect, as one has to catch one of the zebras first, and this entails the use of a pneumatic dart with a cocktail of opioids, 10,000 times more potent than morphine. To get a sample, we drive around the national park, which is roughly 1/10 the size of the UK. In such vast plains, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. When we have found a group of zebras, we have to shoot the selected animal in the shoulder and wait about 5 minutes for the animal to become groggy and fall over. Then we rush in to gather our samples before the effects of the tranquilizer will wear off. This is a tried and tested procedure that usually yields excellent results. However, every now and then an animal somehow manages to override the effects of the sedative and becomes more agitated than drowsy. This can happen if the creature becomes stressed prior to the tranquilizer being administered. That's what probably happened that day. We spotted a female zebra just right for the purposes of our research, and after shooting the dart we followed her. We were confident that the sedative would quickly take effect, she would tire herself out, take a nap in the open. However, she not only kept galloping for much longer than we expected, but also headed straight for a scrubby acacia tree, the only one within a 5-kilometer radius. In hindsight, I suspect she was aware of our presence and wanted to conceal herself from us in the shade of the tree. What occurred soon after was a spectacular collision between the zebra and the tree. This solitary structure had a V-shaped branch that was precisely the height and width of the zebra's neck, so our zebra got completely stuck. To get the zebra out of her predicament, it took 2 qualified vets pulling her tail and the third one maneuvering the zebra's head out of the V-shaped branch. Then she was immediately tranquilized again with an additional dose of the sedative, so that we could finally take the blood samples, and when the sedative stopped working, she jumped up defiantly, trotted away back to her herd, and resumed grazing as if nothing had happened. Dobrze.
Ja chciałbym tylko tutaj podkreślić jedną rzecz, że te pierwsze 3 zadania to jest słuchanie, więc te teksty słyszelibyśmy co najwyżej dwukrotnie.
No, tak, no, mówiąc szczerze, nie wiem, czy nie wolałbym go usłyszeć.
Tak?
No.
Nie, no jakby możliwość jakby odwołania się do każdego z tych zdań jest chyba całkiem spoko, niż 2 razy
No,
to słyszysz i dobra.
Tak, ale jakby to odwołanie nie jest konieczne, bo odpowiedź zaznaczam zwykle przed odwołaniem i potem szukam odwołania, żeby nikt się do mnie nie mógł przyczepić.
Okej, dobra, rozumiem. Ale no, więc
Dobrze.
jakby czytanie to się jeszcze zacznie, drodzy widzowie, to jest dopiero słuchanie.
Dokładnie, dobrze. Searching for a zebra in the sufficient because... Więcej niż jeden powód. W sumie searching to nie, dobra. The park is a pen of the size of the UK. Nie ma limitu słów.
Nie.
Dobrze. Agitation can be an indication that the zebra wants to rest before being shot with a sedative dart. According to the speaker, the zebra might have run towards the acacia tree to hide from the research crew. To take the blood samples, it was necessary to administer the sedative again as soon as the zebra was freed from the acacia tree. Może
Mhm.
komuś nie odpowiadają moje odpowiedzi.
Ja nawet się nie będę z nimi kłócił, chyba że ktoś na czacie tutaj, może Ola, jakieś uwagi.
Było mi obiecane kłócenie się, więc proszę. Ale merytorycznie.
Sara, ja też wiem, że jesteś, to może tutaj coś do pana korepetytora, masz jakieś uwagi.
O Boże.
No dobrze.
No
To
dobra.
tymczasem pierwsza czytanka.
Tak. Moment, wezmę kapicie. Dobrze, nasze pytania brzmią. The opening lines of the text illustrate that. Poppy's description of her preparations for the Friday meeting reveals, when selecting places to promote in her magazine Swampna. Okay. Based on the last paragraph, we can conclude that carrot. Dobrze, muszę powalczyć, bo mi pasek boczny blokuje kawałek tekstu. Moment. O, już mi nie blokuje kawałka tekstu.
Dobrze.
Poppy Swapna says from the head of the dull grey conference table, "What have you got? The benevolent..." To nie brakuje słówka, literki. Never mind. Benevolent ruler of the rest plus relaxation magazine empire, Swapna Bakshi Highsmith, could not possibly exemplify our fine magazine's two core values any less. The last time Swapna rested was probably 3 years ago, when she was 8.5 months pregnant and on doctor-mandated bed rest. Even then, she spent the whole time video conferencing with the office, so I don't think there was a ton of relaxation involved. Everything about her is sharp and pointed and smart. Her winged eyeliner could slice through an aluminium can, and her emerald eyes could crush it afterward. In this moment, both are pointed squarely at me. Poppy? Hello? I blink out of my daze and lean forward. This has been happening to me a lot lately. When you have a job where you're only required to come into the office once a week, it's not ideal to zone out like a kid in algebra for 50% of the time. Even less so to do it in front of your both terrifying and inspiring boss. I study the notepad in front of me. I used to come to the Friday meetings with dozens of excitedly scribbled pitches. I would work in a kind of panic. I'd spend 3 days before pitch meetings in something of a sweaty Google trance, scrolling through image after image of places I'd never been to, feeling something like hunger growing in my gut. Today, however, I spent 10 minutes scrolling the names of countries. Countries, not even cities. Swapna is looking at me, waiting for me to pitch my next big summer feature, and I'm staring at the word Brazil. Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world. You cannot write a short, snappy piece about vacationing in Brazil. You have to at least choose a specific region. I flip the page in my notebook pretending to study the next one. It's blank. When my coworker Garrett leans toward me, as if to read over my shoulder, I snap it closed. St. Petersburg, I say. Swapna arches an eyebrow. We did St. Petersburg in our summer issue 3 years ago, remember? Amsterdam? Garrett throws out next to me. Amsterdam's a spring city, Swapna says, vaguely annoyed. Besides, Amsterdam is so trendy. It is Swapna's closely held belief that to be on trend is to be already late to that trend. If she senses the zeitgeist warming to the idea of Torun, Poland, then Torun's banned for the next 10 years. There's a literal list pinned to the wall in the office entitled Places R+R will not cover. Each entry is in her handwriting and dated, and there's something of an underground betting pool on when a city will be freed from the list. There's never so much quiet excitement in the office as those mornings when Swapna marches in and straight up to the list, ready to cross off one of those banned cities. Everyone watches with bated breath, wondering which city she's rescuing from rest and relaxation, obscurity. And once she's safely in her office, whoever's closest to the list will run up to it, read the scratched out entry, and turn to whisper the name of the city to everyone in editorial. There's usually silent celebration. When Paris was dropped from the list last fall, Garrett pulled a red beret out of a drawer in his desk where he'd apparently been hiding it for just such an occasion. He wore it all day, pulling it off his head every time we heard the click and whine of Swapna's door. He thought he'd gotten away with it, too, until she paused beside his desk on her way out for the night and said, "Au revoir, Garrett." His face had gone as bright as the beret, and though I didn't think Swapna had meant it to be anything but funny, he's never quite recovered his confidence since then. Holy fuck, to imię. Swapna? Jakiś lepszy pomysł na czytanie tego?
Nie no, brzmi dobrze.
No i francuski znowu to też, no ale... The opening lines of the text illustrate that. Swapna attaches importance to unwinding. Yeah. Swapna's ambition is to show more empathy. Okej. Odpowiedź D. Nawet mogę podkreślić dlaczego. Proszę bardzo. Poppy's description of her preparation for the Friday meeting reveals. Ups, te minusy za bardzo pośrodku. Znowu D. I used to come to Friday meeting with dozens of excitedly scribbled pitches. Today, however, I spent 10 minutes scrolling the names of countries, not even cities. And selecting places to promote in her magazine, Swapna. W sensie B, bo pozostałe nie pasują, ale teraz szukam, czy jest gdzieś co napisane konkretnie.
Swapna.
Okej. Tak, bardzo dobrze. Dobrze pamiętałem znaczenie słowa. Science Amsterdam is so trendy. It is Swapna's closely held belief that to be on trend is already late to that trend. Senses that... No, ta część. W sumie wszystko dotąd. Based on the last paragraph, we can conclude that Garrett Felt intimidated by Swapna's remark. Dobrze. Nie było takie trudne, tylko było dużo czytania.
Tak jak w każdym kolejnym zadaniu.
No, dobrze. Znowu ponownie mamy problem w formie pasek koliduje, więc trzeba przesunąć. No, w ten sposób jest lepiej. Dobrze, dziękuję. Znowu zadanie otwarte. I o Boże, jest 7 osób patrzących na nas. To znaczy, że może 3 są... O, 9. Okej, dobrze. Dużo.
Jeśli ktoś z Was rozwiązywał tą maturę i ma swoje jakieś sugestie, to bardzo zachęcamy do pisania w komentarzach.
Dobrze. A change for the better. Workplaces have become fairer thanks to a rising ethos of meritocracy. The idea that the best person for the job is the right person for the job. Formal assessment processes, for example, help ensure that job interviews are granted on merit rather than being allocated on the basis of which CVs remind the hiring manager of a younger version of themselves. One consequence of meritocracy is the replacement of seniority-based promotion, where you get a better position when it's your time, with one based on ability, a development that means younger people with the appropriate skills can leap over older colleagues and end up managing them. Unfortunately, according to new research published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior, it turns out that this can have nasty repercussions. Florian Kunz and Jochen Menges surveyed employees at 61 German companies. Nearly 8,000 participants reported an age difference in relation to their managers, and the subset described their experience of various negative emotions over the last 6 months. A quarter of the managers were younger than those they managed. Crucially, in companies where the size of the age gap between younger managers and older subordinates was statistically significant, employees tended to report more negative emotions such as anger or fear. Why would this be? We are inclined to measure our life progress by using our peers as a benchmark. So if they pull ahead of us, rubbing our faces in our own inability to keep pace, a flash of envy is usually provoked, and it is even more irritating when those who are our juniors climb the ladder faster. More broadly, being under the supervision of someone younger than us is a simple incongruence of status. This is an engine for resentment-based negative emotions, which can be detrimental to productivity if not well managed. When Kunze and Menges asked the leadership of each company to report on its recent financial results, as well as different measures of efficiency, they found that companies experiencing more negative emotions showed worse performance on all counts. Presumably, this is due to declining enthusiasm for collective effort in the face of so much frustration. Kunze and Menges do not claim that companies should revert to the old workplace with traditional age structures. However, they do believe that the negative repercussions that they've revealed should be addressed. One suggestion is to help older subordinates make sense of their feelings and explore whether they can come to terms with them rather than simply suppressing them. I believe this would best be done in conjunction with changing the culture around career timetables and addressing issues of hierarchy and participation so that old-timers, whether managers or not, can share their accrued wisdom within the organizations to which they have contributed for so long. From the first paragraph, we learned that in many companies promotion is no longer based on das seniority, będzie dobrym słowem z tego. In the second paragraph, the author argues that employees' negative emotion result from people's natural tendency to compare themselves to colleagues who Wydaje mi się coś takiego. Who are ahead of them while younger. The survey findings showed negative emotions led to underperformance in the companies which took part in the study. In the last paragraph, the authors just how companies can address the opponent. Please can address the issue. Tylko sam adres the issue będzie za mało, mi się wydaje, więc muszę coś jeszcze tego dopisać. Ale żeby dopisać wszystko, to byłoby znowu za dużo. Issue. Dobra, w ten sposób może. Address the issue associated with the new structures.
No to teraz jest kilka sekund na Państwa komentarze, uwagi, jakieś może zmiany w tych odpowiedziach.
I dlaczego odpowiedź z ostatniego jest za długa? Nikt nie krzyczy.
No mamy opóźnienie, ale wydaje mi się, że chyba jest wszystko w porządku, ale jakby było jakieś potwierdzenie od czatu, że tak, to fajnie, a my już możemy przejść do zadania 5, czyli do połowy tej matury.
Okej. O, nie otwarte. Nawet jeszcze zobaczę resztę zadań. Czy są jakieś... Jeszcze są 2 otwarte, okej. How the baseball cap went from athletic gear to fashion statement. The first ever baseball game that you would recognize took place in Hoboken, New Jersey, on June 19, 1846, when the New York Knickerbockers played the more prosaically named New York Baseball Club. When the players sport when they arrived at Elysian Fields. Okay. Co szukamy? Okej. Wydaje mi się, że tu będzie There had already been buttoned glove competitions throughout the Northeast, to be sure, but the Knickerbockers had made things official, formalizing the number of team members, the rules of play, and the uniform. The one that the players sported when they arrived at Elysian Fields, where the match took place, consisted of matching shirts and pantaloons, and wide-brimmed hats made of thin, plated wood strips. Though the Knickerbockers' stipulation that each player must also have the reputation of a gentleman has been sadly strained over the years, the modern game still owes a great deal to the mid-19th century. Okay. That day's game featured 9 innings, 9 field positions, and an untimed pace of play, customs that hold to this day. By contrast, the original hats didn't last. The Knickerbockers switched to merino wool within a couple of years. The cap as we know it today began to take shape around the turn of the century. Its design eventually acquired a narrow front brim and specialized stitching to support a higher, more comfortable crown made of 6 panels. Air holes were also added. The stubby new model was designed not for style but rather to keep the sun out of players' eyes. Then in 1901, the Detroit Tigers made arguably the farthest reaching innovation in the game's history. They put their namesake animal on their caps, turning a utilitarian sunshade into a battle flag. The cap's usefulness and brandability would turn it into America's greatest fashion export. It changed the way people dress in every country of the world. The Philadelphia-style cap, with a sturdier brim, debuted 7 years later and was quickly embraced by major league teams. Designers continued to tinker as crowns grew higher and materials became stronger. However, it was not until the advent of television, the first major league game was telecast on August 26, 1939, that a whole new audience was brought to the sport which participated a rush of uniform redesigns. As a result, by 1945 every team was wearing their own branded cap. Zaraz przed wojną zaczęli. 5 dni. In the 1980s new era, the company that had supplied Major League Baseball for decades started selling authentic team-branded hats to fans. Soon they became a must-have accessory.
Miałem chwilowy swatting już jest.
Dobrze. Wydaje mi się, że C. Przez względu na słówko Other Luminaries. Princess Diana się pod to łapie. Pozostałych brakuje mi kogoś sławnego, kogo można by nazwać jako Luminari. Dobrze.
Dobra.
Let's go. 6. Dowiadujemy się nowych rzeczy dzisiaj. Ciekawe teksty bardzo. Dobrze. In which paragraph does the author mention Lincoln's conviction that the patenting of invention serves as a vehicle for advancing technology, provide evidence of the need for an invention like Lincoln's, referred to people who contributed to Lincoln's endeavor before he applied for a patent, point out that Lincoln's device did not enter production. The only president ever to have a patent. Upon hearing the name Abraham Lincoln, many images may come to mind. Country lawyer, young congressman, embattled president, great emancipator, assassination victim, even the colossal face carved into Mount Rushmore. One aspect of this multi-dimensional man that probably doesn't occur to anyone other than avid readers of Lincoln biographies is his endeavors as an inventor. Before he became the 16th President of the United States, Lincoln, who had long been fascinated with how things worked, przesuniesz lekko to D, E, bo cina mi potem kawałek jeszcze też niżej.
DE?
W bok bardziej, bo tnie mi. Okej, już teraz jest okej. Chyba bardziej. Nie, nevermind. Ściągnąłeś to w dół i teraz tnie z dolnego tekstu. Nie w dół, tylko w bok. I możesz zwrócić z powrotem do góry. Okay. Fascinated with how things worked, invented a flotation system for lifting stranded riverboats, which gives him yet another honor. He remains the only US president to have a patent in his name. Okay, do niczego mi tam nie pasuje. Lincoln's patent was granted on May 22nd, 1849 for a device for buoying vessels over shoals. His idea to equip boats with inflatable bellows of India rubber cloth or some other suitable waterproof fabric came about as a result of river and lake expeditions he had made as a young man, ferrying people and produce on the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. At least twice his boats ran aground on sandbars, given the ever-shifting shallows of the Mississippi. Such potentially dangerous misadventures happened often. Freeing a stranded vessel usually involved the laborious unloading of cargo until the boat floated high enough to clear the obstacle. To będzie chyba 2. Lincoln appears to have had more than a passing affinity for mechanical devices and tools. William H. Herndon, his law partner at the time when he was working on his invention, wrote that Lincoln evinced a decided bent toward machinery or mechanical appliances, a trait he doubtless inherited from his father, who was himself something of a mechanic. Lincoln is said to have been interested in water transportation and canal building, and enthusiastically promoted both when he served in the Illinois legislature. He was also an admirer of patent law, famously declaring that it added the fuel of interest to the fire of genius in the discovery and production of new and useful things. Będzie C. According to Herndon, Lincoln would bring a wooden boat model into the law office, and while working on it would elaborate on its merits and the revolution, it was destined to work in steamboat navigation. A Springfield mechanic, Walter Davies, was said to have provided tools and advice for constructing the original model, but it's thought that he detailed miniature of the boat with Lincoln, submitted to the patent office, may have been made by a model maker in Washington who specialized in aiding inventors. To będzie do trzeciego. The patent describes in great detail how by turning the main shaft or shafts in one direction, the buoyant chambers of the flotation system would be forced downwards into the water and at the time would expand and fill with air. As the invention never went beyond the prototype stage, doubts remain as to whether it would have been capable of achieving its stated aim due to the amount of force needed to lower and fill the air chambers. Będzie w czwartym. Tutaj daliśmy radę.
Cpd.
Dobrze, to następne. O, ABCD, jak miło. Dawno nie było. Trochę jeszcze czytania. Jak miło, dawno nie było. Dobrze. The Secrets of the Tower of London's Royal Raven Master. Grotron. There are some weird jobs associated with the British royal household. For example, there's a keeper of the monarch's stamps and a royal clockwinder. And then there's the Raven Master, Christopher Scaife. Charged with caring for the 7 corvids that reside at the Tower of London. Every mention of the tower's ravens makes reference to how King Charles II issued a royal decree to protect the ravens forevermore, after having been warned that if the birds ever flew away, the tower itself would crumble to dust, and great harm would befall the kingdom. Great story, but total codswallop, says Scaife, who has pored through the archives and found out that the first mention of ravens at the tower appeared not in the 17th century, where Charles reigned through the years of plague and fire, but during the Victorian age, when the Gothic revival was in full swing. Up close, the ravens resemble enormous crows dipped in oil. What do they do all day? They perch on benches, play with magpies, and rummage through the rubbish bins, Scaife says. The ravens, like most Brits, have a weakness for potato crisps, which they scavenge and then wash in puddles if the flavoring, say cheddar and onion, is not to their liking. Ravens are surprisingly similar to us. They mate for life, more or less, and are capable of great cruelty and great kindness, he explains. The ravens in the tower can fly, but not very well and not too far. They flap up to the rooftops and battlements. Previous caregivers substantially trimmed ravens' feathers so as to prevent them from flying altogether, but Scaife vowed to trim as little as possible. He calls it feather management, just a snip more in the long, warm days of summer and less in cold, dark winter. Scaife himself is an unending source of raven lore, not just myths and stories, but habits and personalities. I never get bored of watching how ravens go about their lives, he says. Just never know what they're going to do, so you've always got to be on your toes when you're looking after them. Ale ciężkie słówka tutaj każą nam wybierać. Nie sądzę, zupełnie jakby ten test był zrobiony dla kogoś, kto umie angielski. Nie, to rozszerzenie i podstawa. Dobrze. Kolejne fajne tematy. Fajne tematy są w tych tekstach niektórych. Dobrze. Ile mamy? Jedno słowo.
Jedno.
Dobrze. More than 80 years ago, in 1940, a grey rabbit hopped out of a hole in the ground. Then he knocked on a bald man's head and asked, "What's up, Doc?" The sound of the crunching of a large carrot. Oh, to the sound of the crunching of a large carrot. The rabbit had appeared previously in short cartoons. It was his memorable scene that it was... A, dobrze. Although... Dobrze to piszę? Tak, ale ty... Z małej, nie z dużej, dobrze. Although the rabbit had appeared previously in short cartoons, it was this memorable scene that paved the way for the version of the rabbit that would become the cultural icon named Bugs Bunny. In the decades since then, Bugs had appeared in over 150 films and earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and even got his face on a postage stamp. What is the reason for such immense popularity? Some might say that Disney's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, who came with their own set of physical characteristics but lack much personality. O, to jest przecinek? Przecinek, dobra.
Tak, tak, tak.
Bugs is sharply defined by his originalities and witty banter. That... Dobrze, w tym co będzie w trzecim, przeczytałem, żeby zaproponować więcej kontekstu. Apart. Some might say that w sensie wydaje mi się, że unlike może być. Unlike Disney's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, who come with their own set of physical characteristics but lack much personality, Bugs is sharply defined by his know-it-all attitude and witty banter. Others claim that what sets Bugs Bunny apart from many cartoon characters is his ability to stay true to himself. The fact is that from his opera debut in What's Opera, Doc, to his appearances in action films, Bugs Bunny hasn't changed at all. More recent animated characters have established themselves through a sliding scale of meanness, but Bugs still remains the lovable character who only makes fun of those who deserve it most. Makes fun of those who deserve it most. So this could be the reason why Bugs Bunny still goes down really well with people all over the world. Niesamowite, udało się.
No i ostatnie.
Oh, nice. Some people will do anything to get the latest model of this phone. Some people will go to great lengths. Jak może wydłużyć? Go to great lengths. Do 5, tak? Do 5.
Tak, 5.
Noises coming from the water pipes in my house are nothing strange. There is nothing out of the ordinary. About noises coming from the water pipes in my house. Rumor has it that Jack's company lost over £10 million pounds during last year's recession. Jack's company is rumored to have sustained losses of over 10 million pounds during the last year's recession. The thought of applying for a scholarship to Cambridge never crossed my mind. Not for a moment. Have I considered? A, przepraszam. Ma być zmienione.
Tak, tak, tak.
Not for a moment did I consider a scholarship to Cambridge. Just because you've lost your wallet, don't behave aggressively towards everybody. It's not our fault. Just because you've lost your wallet, don't take it out on everybody. Dobrze, znaleźliśmy miejsce, gdzie były potrzebne. Ups, nie, to nie działa. Bo don't już mamy. Okej. Szybałem, miałem 5 słówek, bo don't jest do not, no nie?
A no tak.
Don't take it out on everybody.
No dobra, to
Dobra.
mamy wszystko jest zapisane w opisie. Dobra, jeszcze jaki jest temat ten? Czy szersze wykorzystanie sztucznej inteligencji jest szansą czy zagrożeniem? Napisz rozprawkę, w której przedstawisz swoją, odnosząc się do następujących aspektów: rynek pracy, bezpieczeństwo, kultura i sztuka.
Fajne, łatwe.
Przeczytałeś artykuł dotyczący przekształcenia zrujnowanych zamków i pałaców w ekskluzywne hotele. Napisz list do gazety, w którym przedstawisz opinię na temat tego zjawiska, odnosząc się do ochrony zabytków, aspektu finansowego oraz atrakcyjności takiej oferty zakwaterowania dla turystów. No,
Oba
to
tematy fajne.